Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's presentation, brought to you by ISSA, the Worldwide Cleaning Industry Association, and made possible by SoftBank Robotics. I'm Hannah Oates, your host for today's presentation, and I'm very excited to have you join us for part 2 of a 5-part webinar series, Automation Amidst the New Normal. During these uncertain times, ISSA, along with SoftBank Robotics, developed this webinar series to assist in industry in navigating the challenges brought on by the coronavirus outbreak and deliver solutions to meet the needs of the new normal. Our goal with this series is to continue to raise the image of the cleaning industry and effectively continue to change the way the world views cleaning while elevating the awareness of cleaning for health. So thank you again for joining us today. Part 2 of the webinar series, Automation Amidst the New Normal, will include today's discussion on how effective cleaning precedes effective disinfecting and the role of robots in the new normal. So if you missed part 1 of the series, it can be viewed on demand at issa.com/TV. Part 3 of the webinar series will take place 2 weeks from today on May 14th, so please mark your calendars and be sure to join us for another great presentation. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists today and get our presentation started, I have a couple of announcements. First, we want you to get the most out of today's webinar and have any specific questions you may have answered by subject matter experts. So please ask any questions you have for your panelists using the questions tab on the right-hand toolbar and type your questions at any time during the presentation. We will have a Q&A session following the discussion. Secondly, all registrants will receive a recording of today's webinar by email to view on demand within the next couple of days. And with that, let's get things started. Today's presentation will be moderated by Brady Watkins. Brady Watkins is the head of commercial automation at SoftBank Robotics America. He advises SoftBank partners in their automation-enabled business innovation, focusing on products and services for commercial management in sectors such as real estate, transportation, and retail. Next, we have ISSA's own Patty Hollinger. Patty, the executive director of GBAC, a division of ISSA, is an international expert in the development and implementation of biorisk management programs, including educational programs. She has a true passion for global public health preparedness, response, and recovery to emerging infectious diseases. And last but not least, Chris Wright. Chris Wright joined Brain Corp as the Vice President of Sales in June of 2017. He has spent the majority of his career in the cleaning industry and as a result has gained more than 30 years of experience in a variety of positions. He holds numerous certifications and has subject matter expertise in equipment, robotics, and cleaning. Needless to say, we have an incredible group of industry experts, and I'm happy to get out of the way and hand things over to Brady Watkins. Brady, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you everyone out there. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. Very excited to have this conversation today. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank you out there for listening to us. From everyone, myself, Patty, Chris, ISSA, Hannah, GBAC, SoftBank, and Brain OS, thank you for participating in this environment and being in this industry. It couldn't be a more challenging yet exciting time. And we're really looking forward to having a really great dialogue with you and ourselves today to really help evolve the industry and make sure that you feel as though you're being supported and helped and getting information on how to deliver an effective and successful clean. Patty, Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Oh man, I'm excited. Okay, so it's cleaning, guys. This needs to be fun and exciting. So what I wanted to do and to really get us is let's sort of regroup on what we heard from the first webinar, which I really thought was good. So those of us that have followed the series, thank you. And those of you that will continue to, really appreciate it. But just to really bring the group back, when we talk about what some key themes that materialized in the first webinar, it was this idea when we talk about automation and how automation helps deliver single pervasive tasks to be able to drive an efficient cleaning environment. the conversation from the panelists and even the market was this idea that cleaning was a beauty contest. And I thought that was really interesting. And when we start to think about it, public health and trust is now paramount. And this idea of a confirmed clean and cleaning frequency and sanitization are really now important. And as we think about that importance, I think it really comes into what phase 2 really needs to look like it for us. So one of the things that I think we really want to do before we get into it is let's talk about frequency and cleaning. And in order to do that, we need to hear from you. So the first step for the group in terms of delivering a poll is let's make sure this is interactive. So which of these parts of your cleaning has changed the most in our new normal? We're going to give you guys a minute to be able to select, and then we'll make sure we drive immediately into our panelists to help us answer the question.
This is going to be interesting to hear the results from everybody watching on this question. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely.
Right on. And I think, as we're thinking about it, Chris, I'll even jump in while we're trying to get, as we think about, I'll even pinpoint frequency here as a question. What are some of the things that you think you're hearing from your BrainOS users in terms of the importance of cleaning frequency?
Without question, we've seen it increase dramatically. We've got over 10,000 units deployed in the field. Over 3,000 of those are deployed directly into retail environments, and some of which are critical businesses. And we've seen an over 13% increase in usage just in the first quarter, and especially in the last month and a half, which is an automatic indicator that cleaning is taking place more often, and the importance of cleaning has definitely shifted, and it's becoming more critical.
And and Patty, I'm sure we'll get into it when we see the results. This massive reallocation of time to sanitization, really, but it's only worthwhile if we can get to the effective clean. So I think even as we were talking about it before, this idea that how we think about sanitization and how we actually have time to do an effective clean first is going to be really important. So I'm curious to get your thoughts here when we get the final responses. So as we're seeing this happen, all right, well, let's go. So we know perfect. So quick results, frequency and supplies needed. And I think that actually really caters into a lot of the things Chris talked about in terms of frequency. So Patty, I like supplies and frequency as a combination. So when we think about what GBAC's doing, maybe you could talk to me about what are some of the predictions that GBAC has of the new normal in terms of both what is the virus and what is real disinfecting. So I think when we get into that first, the supplies and frequency conversation becomes really relevant.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, when we teach, we talk about, a stool, basically like a three-legged stool where you have training, equipment, and then chemistry. And what people are finding is that, first of all, that the training needed for what's going to be expected going forward is different than what they have had in the past, or it's augmenting what they've had in the past. And it's critical, especially as we look at the chemistries to be used, because are they just cleaning, are they sanitizing or disinfecting? And then, how to correctly use that with understanding what the dwell time is if you're trying to disinfect. And then the equipment aspect is really critical. People are starting to ask questions about what is available, and then recognizing that there's equipment out there that helps them do their jobs more effectively and efficiently, because again, getting to the frequency, people are expecting more from them. And the workforce may be the same as what they had prior to this.
Chris, love to hear your thoughts on that too, because we were talking even off camera. We were having a really great conversation of this idea of frequency, time, and accurate sanitization. What are some things that you're hearing when you talk to your customers that are surprising you?
One of the things that's surprising me the most is as we move into this, I think a lot of people really didn't understand the definition between sanitizing, between disinfecting, what they truly meant, and the fact that cleaning is a precursor to these, that you have to clean before you can truly sanitize or disinfect. So I think the knowledge is great now that's coming out, that everybody is trying to find out what the best way to go is. And as I said, the great thing is that the tools are out there, and I just think that the spotlight is on this now, and so everybody is hyper conscious about it. And because of that, I think we're actually going to see, a big shift in cleaning as an industry as a whole, which I think is going to benefit everybody.
Absolutely. When we think
I
about
totally agree.
yeah, Patty, and both of you, I think we've talked a lot even in preparation for this, right? The new normal and that cleaning being brought to the forefront in terms of understanding both in social norms and macroeconomic impact, right? Health and trust. How do we make sure that we're continuing to deliver that client trust, delivering a healthy environment, and thinking about how to do that from a frequency perspective? So I really want to get into the meat of this when we talk about it. So what does effective cleaning, how do we enable effective sanitization for effective cleaning? I think that's really important from the discussion. And so, Patty, I love how you touched upon the supplies, the frequency, and sort of what we're seeing. And I'd love to really have the group understand what GBAC is doing and some of the GBAC standards that you're creating in the market, really thinking about this, because we know our clients and we know the public is going to ask us, how do we think about standards, making sure we're delivering an effective, safe environment for us to go back to work as we start to approach that. So I want to hear from you, but again, as we want from the participation of the group, I really like these questions. What I want to start to get into is hearing from the groups. So the second poll as we think about effective cleaning and disinfection is, so group out there in your day-to-day, where are you focusing most of your energy cleaning before you disinfect? Surface wiping, dusting, vacuuming, I'm only disinfecting, or let's put another in there if it's not happening. And again, we'll pause for about 30 seconds to get some information. And also the live chat, just so you know, is also available. So if anyone has any questions real time, we'll make sure that we organize those and get them together.
Yeah, this is another great question as the participants are answering is, where do you focus now? And I noticed on the third concern was workforce on the when we polled on the previous question, and we're going to see that we're going to, as people move back out, some people are afraid to go back to work. Some people might want to be shifting careers. I mean, this is going to have a massive impact on the workforce in so many different ways, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But and that's why I think technology and particularly robotics is going to really come into play to help augment and fill the voids that many businesses are going to start seeing.
Yes, and the whole, I mean, to add on to that, I think we're also seeing that there are some industries that are, or some individuals who are coming into the industry, and that whole, well, the concept of professional cleaning and professional disinfection is a real critical need, and the whole, again, training and understanding the equipment just helps so much in being able to do it effectively.
And totally agree. And as we see the polls coming in, so surface wiping. I think, Patty, I think you can touch on this in terms of surface wiping not only being the most focused, but more as you think about driving standards and where is GBAC placing focus and effort on standardization. Maybe start talking about that, and then let's think through sort of maybe the myths and or the realities of how surface wiping in general is really helping to drive disinfection, if at all, and how are you building standards to help combat and then deliver a confirmed and effective clean?
Okay. So GBAC really, in the past, before we joined ISSA, we were really focused on what we're now calling kind of boutique training in kind of some areas of specialty in public health preparedness, crime and trauma, and those high level, high risk situations, like planes that brought in Ebola patients in the past, and really focusing on those high level areas, but recognizing there was a need to be able to expand that. In the last couple months, we've been looking at some other things. Our fundamentals training we put online because obviously initially I think I canceled 3 courses just because we couldn't get together. And we recognized that there needed to be an online module because everybody was being asked to go out, clean, disinfect, and sanitize. So we have the fundamentals of GBAC fundamentals now online. We also recognized that as it was a concept that we were going to roll out this fall called GBAC Star. And GBAC Star is to assist facilities in coming back, but it was actually initially thought of as, how do you accredit a facility to say we are cleaning, disinfecting appropriately to really cleaning for health and disinfecting for health? And how do we assure that a facility is doing that? I always equate it to a hotel that has, you know, the little cards that say I'm green and sustainable, that now they could have a GBAC Star that says our work practices and our disinfection procedures are in place, and we, you know, we're here to protect our employees, our customers, our clients, and the environment. And we're about ready to launch our GBAC Star program on May 7th. We're working with different groups to look at the standards. And then when you start looking at sanitization and disinfection, it really feeds into, you know, cleaning those surfaces. And we, you know, before you disinfect or throughout the process, how you're doing that. Frequency is a big issue, especially as we go to reopen. But even more importantly, it is looking at what we have from a technology standpoint in today to be able to help us be able to do things more effectively and efficiently, because we know that just wiping, we miss spots. And so some of it is time, you know, and that's where the robotics can come in. If the robotics can take on some of these activities that was traditionally done by, you know, a human being, then what we can do is focus our efforts on some of those other areas, such as disinfecting high-touch surfaces.
I love that. So when we talk about effectiveness, it sounds like it's training and knowledge and understanding. It's not only sanitizing, but understanding the part of the process, integrating technology within people. And so it's really rethinking about the whole ecosystem, because again, effectiveness is what we're all after, both three of us as well as in the market. So I love how you use technology and robotics. And maybe Chris, I'd love to get your take. So obviously we've been seeing brain-powered robots, including from a SoftBank Robotics perspective, Wiz, in the news, and that we're really, those robots are trying to deploy. So we're trying to tackle cleaning demands today. But what makes automation so much more effective in cleaning than, say, just manual labor on its own?
It's a great question. You know, the reality of cleaning is cleaning, you know, has become more important than ever. It's typically was a task that you would normally only see third shift, you know, behind closed doors, and a lot of people weren't even aware of it. And now it's been brought to the forefront. And so we're seeing now that the tasks, especially surface wiping, and it doesn't surprise me at all that the number one responsible surface wiping. And that is a task that is the training and is going to have to be done absolutely by an individual for the most part. I mean, that is going to be a very manual task. It's going to have to be focused. The employees are going to have to be wearing proper protective gear, PPE. They're going to be using the correct chemicals and learning how to use them correctly to accomplish this. So when you take a product like, you know, Wiz or a Brain OS powered scrubber, what you're basically doing is taking those standard cleaning tasks, which have to happen, and you are able to automate that and free this up. So really what you have now is, we refer to it a lot of times as a cobot, as you have an additional player or players on your team to focus on the standard cleaning that has to happen, and allows you to free up on now the specialty, which is focusing on the surface wiping, doorknobs, point of service machines, door handles, to any touch points. And, you know, really as more and more stuff comes out, we're finding that those are really kind of the critical areas that really need to be focused on in order to slow or stop the spread of COVID-19.
Love it. I completely agree. And I think as we look about the reason for the panel and the opportunity is, so how do we get effectiveness and sanitization together, and then how does automation play? So automation at its core is really about creating efficiency, and it's about looking at the overall tasks that are included in delivering value to our clients and their request, both a healthy and trusted environment to be successful. So how are we thinking about those tasks? So I kind of want to move the discussion to, how do we think about automation creating effectiveness in a cooperative environment, so in the cobotics environment with people. So as we think about it, and we think, let's just take a step back and say, what's effective cleaning now? So we know effective cleaning and sanitization have to be interconnected. We have all these additional tasks that we now have to solve. We have additional training, but effective cleaning, how do we deliver it? And how's that going to change our environment? So we sort of come up with, I think, 5 ways that, an effective cleaning needs to be and should be. So one, I think, as we think about effective, just complete coverage. And I want to make sure I get the panelists to weigh in after I go through this. Complete coverage today. Sanitization and disinfection is about, the beauty contest comment from the prior panel I thought was apropos, which is, okay, in order to sanitize and disinfect, we have to completely cover the entire area. It's not just areas that we see, it's the entire area needs to be sanitized based on what we're understanding, particularly for the COVID virus. How are we pinpointing high traffic areas and how automation can help? It's not just about 1 or 2 areas, but where are we seeing the most traffic? We talk about frequency. The most traffic means the most repeatability. Every time someone goes through and touches or walks, that's an area that we have to disinfect. So how do we think that through? The idea of a confirmation of clean. How do we ensure that we actually were there? How do we leverage technology, process, and protocols to be able to make that happen? And Chris, you touched on it before, in enabling labor in the workforce. Again, the workforce is our best asset here. How do we enable them to achieve what we call the higher fidelity areas that are really important to actually provide that effective sanitization and clean is really good. So how can automation and robotics help relieve some of those tasks to be able to do this new standard that we have to deliver knowledge and training? And then preparation, we talked about it before. It's not just about spraying. It's about how do we prep, spray, complete, time dry, making sure that we're thinking about that whole ecosystem to be successful. Can robotics and automation help? The good news is absolutely. So it's already been there in terms of relieving those tasks. So I think those are really core areas as we think about effective cleaning and automation and how we can deliver. And so we're going to jump into, I think, pick apart some of these pieces to really provide some value. But I want to go back to the polls because I really like the interaction so far. So thank you, audience. And let's see what you think in terms of where some of the areas where maybe automation can help, or maybe areas that we're not getting that level of complete clean. So when you look at your tasks, are you seeing a need to deprioritize other tasks in order to sanitize? If so, what are those tasks that have been reduced?
One of the things that I think is going to happen with cleaning, and that I'm seeing already starting to happen, especially now as the country is starting to slowly open back up, is cleaning is going to become a critical part of a company's brand value. And you're seeing announcements by major hotel chains, airlines, about everything that they're doing to clean. And I think it's going to become more critical than ever, as consumers and individuals, we go back out, that we are going to be looking and we are going to feel more comfortable dealing with companies that we can see that they are actively taking a role. And that's why I love the idea of the STAR program that Patty was talking about, an easy way to recognize that, whether it is a label on a door or, a label on the outside of an airplane when you're walking into it, just something to show that that best practices are being followed, and just to kind of take that slight apprehension and unease that is out there right now, hopefully reduce it a little bit, and take a little bit of the edge off as we start opening back up.
Oh, thank you, Chris, because we really do. We're really excited about the program and actually working with all the different industries out there, because there's not an industry or a business, what we're calling vertical, that has not been affected by this virus, and by actually the whole awakening to what potentially an epidemic or pandemic can do, as far as affect different businesses and countries and people.
I really like, as we go back to the absolute, I think this whole idea of certification and trust is important. So having the knowledge that you're going into a building that has not only been sanitized based on the GBAC STAR program, but also has the workforce that has been trained to understand it, again, really creates that brand efficacy and training, +1 to that. Really interesting response that I want to dig into. So 2-part question. So one, let's carpets as a deprioritized task. So Patty, maybe I'd love for you to talk through, what do you think is the impact of not vacuuming as usual in a space as we think about health and sanitization or disinfection?
Yeah, I mean, as we all know, carpets just hold dirt and dust and grime as we're walking through them. And you know, routinely vacuuming is one of those things that helps us maintain that floor cleanliness. And so if we are reducing that, you know, we are leaving a lot of that dirt, grime in that area. And so as we're walking through, or people are playing on the carpet, as far as our kids in businesses, you know, we're potentially contaminating other areas by cross-contamination. So it's important to continue, and that's, you know, as like the whiz, that's a great example of where the whiz can continue to be able to still, you know, focus on carpets and the floors, and then allow people to be able to do some of these other areas and tasks that we're talking about.
Completely. It's interesting on carpets. Now I want to go back. Thank you for that. And Chris, what's interesting is the answer is no, which is, are any of the tasks being deprioritized, which means the task level is only increasing. So very often competing. So now I have all the priorities, right? It hasn't gone down. My prioritization, or the list of things I have to do, has gone up. How do we reconcile that? So as we think about, this is sort of freeing up, what does automation do in freeing up tasks? So as we think about what you've seen from your clients, like if you implement automation and robotics, what type of time back do you think we could give the industry to be able to tackle now this expanded priority list?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I, you know, was very interested to see what the answer is going to be, because, you know, myself, you know, I was interested, are we going to see a complete shift where we're going to push down other things and we're going to really hyper focus on, you know, certain tasks? And it's obvious from the answer that no, cleaning still has to happen. And which is true, because cleaning is once again, the first step. And so it absolutely has to happen for, you know, overall health of a building or a facility. So the great thing, you know, when you look at starting to automate, is being able to once again reallocate that labor. And we typically see that once the automation comes in and you go through that initial learning curve, which is pretty quick. Usually it's a week or two where once you get it in, you kind of get it, you know, get a feel for it, and then you actually start the implementation and you start tweaking it. We can usually see an 80+ return from that. You're now returning back to the labor pool compared to the tasks that the automation has replaced, whether that is floor scrubbing or vacuuming. So you can see a very high rate where now you have opened this up without having to potentially go out and hire more people. Because the reality is, if your tasks haven't decreased, yet you're being asked to do more, there's only a couple options that you have. You either have to go out and hire more people. You have to try to ask people to clean more, which is, I mean, they're already being asked to clean more every day, you know, and they're already tired. They're already exhausted because they are doing more. You have to start implementing some procedures and automation to help alleviate and take some of that pressure off of those frontline workers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably one of the number one things that I get asked, as far as, and as we're developing some of our new guidance documents for templates for different businesses, is that frequency question. And then, you know, it's almost a scalable type response, whether it goes up or down based on what's happening, you know, social distancing, you know, and that frequency question keeps coming up. Well, how often do we need to clean? You know, how, is it daily? Is it twice a day? Is it 3 times a day? Is it once a week? It's just the number one thing that people are concerned about. One of the number one things that they're concerned about.
Well, maybe could you help us answer it? So I think that's the question, is how frequent do I need to clean? From your professional opinion, what is the right answer? How frequently should they be doing to be able to deliver that sanitization and disinfection, correct?
Yeah, no, that's a hard one. You know, there's really no right answer in some respects, because it's a lot of it. If you're in let's say an event, you're hosting a trade show. You know, you have a lot of people coming in. Think of your lobbies, front lobbies that they're coming into. How often should you be cleaning? You know, as I think Chris mentioned earlier, as soon as you clean, disinfect, somebody walks in and touches something, and then, you know, it's potentially contaminated again. And so it's the consistency and frequency and putting all of the pieces in place that can be there. So it can be everything from, you know, your work practices, your efficiencies, effectiveness. Like if you have a robotics system that's doing the floors for you, that's also a visual presence to give that confidence to people that, okay, it's a constant thing that's going on. And then on top of it is what we're calling the infectious disease prevention program aspects of, and that gets into the social distancing that's going to have to be put in place as we start opening things up. And then be able to say, okay, what's routine? Again, based on, really cleanliness measures of how we're going to be able to make some of those decisions going forward.
Absolutely. I think back to the whole point, right? Frequent. The answer is more, right? It needs to be more frequent. The reality of the
more.
Yeah, I have friends that have contacted me and have asked me, and my standard answer is really, you can't clean too much right now.
No.
But really, the reality is, that's going to be, it's difficult to implement in, just, oh, how much do I clean? Oh, as much as you can. Now, you have to get back to what Patty says is you got to design a program and have continued frequencies which are followed. I think it's going to be all about consistency is I think where we're moving, and, and following the right practices and procedures is really going to where we're going to start having a major impact. But, once again, right now, you can't clean too much.
Another thing, just from an automation standpoint that I think is important is that, documentation on how we do things, especially for businesses going forward, is going to be important. And one of the things that automation does for us is it does that automatic documentation for you, as far as the paths where the floor robots have cleaned, the frequency that they've cleaned. We as human beings don't necessarily like to document things real well, and it's and having been a former compliance officer, I understand that. So it's one of those things where the automation part helps us, and it's going to be important as we go forward, that documentation, to be able to show that we are doing that consistent and routine cleaning, sanitization, and disinfection.
And I think that consistency and frequency, and even we've talked about it now, we've kind of inadvertently said it, but more of, I think the idea we're hearing from the panel is, hey, we're doing surface cleaning and wiping, but we sort of touched on it, but the floor almost could be just as important in terms of how we think about creating disinfection and sanitization, in terms of, right, fomite transfer, how people are delivering the virus from its feet and sort of tracking around is going to become important. I was just, for the panel, I was just looking at a CDC report that was doing a study in China that kind of found that a lot of the virus was actually being captured in the air filters that were at various locations sort of in the corners, kind of speaking to that there is a floor to airborne way that you can provide cleaning. So as we talk about how do we think about disinfecting the floors, carpet obviously is it's a filter and it captures and it's very important. But when we think about what automation can do in robotics right now, even for Whiz, we all of a sudden have this HEPA filter that's a part of the Whiz that all of a sudden now is being brought into the equation to be able to deliver. So maybe, I don't know, Patty, I'd love to throw it to you. So we think about bringing things like filtration and continued frequency of cleaning an area. What does that do to the sanitization and disinfection capabilities and standards?
So when we talk about vacuuming in general, we're recommending that vacuuming is done with a HEPA vac. And if you think about it, forget about even COVID-19. If you just think about allergens, if you're vacuuming without a HEPA vac, you're basically pushing, the exhaust is pushing those particles back up into the air. So if you're filtering the air as you're vacuuming, you're capturing that. And so that's a really critical piece. And that's one of the recommendations when we talk about vacuuming just in general, we're always talking about HEPA vacuum filtration.
Perfect. So what I want to get
HEPA filters are just a basic standard best practice, as Patty mentioned. It's even far before this. I know they're brought to the forefront. They're nothing new. They've been around a long time, and at your core, you should always have a vacuum cleaner that has a HEPA filter. Just from bacteria spores, allergens, and all the other stuff that is just normally around, you absolutely want to do your best to capture it and not just circulate it, especially now with still a lot unknown. Anything you can do to help the air quality, indoor air quality is going to be a big plus.
Absolutely.
But I think what's interesting, so the last part of the discussion we're going to get into is implementation. And I love what you said, Chris, just in sort of HEPA's been around for a while. So has standards, so has disinfection, so is sanitization, so is robotics. All of these capabilities have actually been around for a while. It's now we've just moved into the need state is bringing it to the forefront, right? I love cleaning is now going, I've heard someone say this and I love it, is cleaning is going from third shift to first shift symbolically in terms of its importance. So all these things have been around. So I really want to take the next 5 to 10 minutes and then take some questions on how do we implement? What does implementation look like? And how do we think about finding the right implementation to achieve sanitization and disinfection and really efficiency and effectiveness in what we're trying to accomplish? Because I'm seeing some of the questions come in. As we know, the industry cares passionately about our clients and constituents. This is relationships people have had over 10 to 15 years. They really care about providing. And I think it's incumbent upon us, and I want to jump in on how do we think about the next step? Like, how do we implement this so that we're actually able to deliver a healthy environment and continue to create trust between the industry and our partners to make sure that we're actually creating a safer environment and can bring the world back to work, which is what we're trying to get to, bring the economy back, which just makes it super exciting. So I think we've touched on it, but I want to really make sure, how do we enable this? So we've talked about tasks are up, so reality. Disinfection and sanitization is a must. Tasks aren't being let go, they're being increased. Those frequency of those tasks are being increased. So how do we figure this out? So I think step one, I love the need state. So now we've moved from, we know we need this, we always have, but now we have the social opportunity of this has become a need. The awareness of if it's clean or not is now elevated. I think this is really important too from an affordability perspective. Kristen, I'd love to get your take on, like, are robots affordable, and how do we think about them in an ROI ecosystem before we get to adoption and scale? So I just love your thoughts. Like, as you think and talk to your parents and brain, what's the conversation? Hey, technology sometimes is expensive, but what we're delivering, is it affordable, and how do we think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. The easy answer would be to simply say, can you afford not to do it? In most cases, because of how everything has changed and how frequencies and everything that you just mentioned are being asked more. But, the realistic answer is it affordable? It is. Is it going to take some changes and adoption into your current practices? Absolutely. But when you start looking at, reopening and the fact that we just, most of the people said, hey, look, my tasks aren't going to decrease. If anything, they're going to increase. You have to start controlling your labor. And as we all know, labor is typically 80% of your spend when it comes to cleaning. So the best way to start attacking that is start going after that labor and finding ways to, robots, whether it is, other technologies, automation, finding ways to take that, to gain back that labor. And once you start looking at ROIs, because some people might get sticker shock, but sometimes typically the machines are, 2-3 times more expensive than the standard machine. But when you really start looking at the numbers, the ROI comes back pretty quickly. I mean, I've seen ROIs on some whiz machines where, there is, less than 60 days. And, I've seen ROIs in large machines that are, sub 18 months. And when you start looking at that, and when you start really truly looking at the numbers, you move beyond just the initial cost, and you start truly understanding and get help to plug it into your process, you really start seeing how affordable they actually are.
And Patty, I want to get back to you when we go to the last poll question, because we're running out on time. Because this is fascinating stuff. We could probably, the three of us could talk for a couple hours. I want to make sure we get back to the audience to see what they think, and we'll talk about adoption and scale and affordability. So for the last question about implementation, for the group is, what is your biggest hurdle in implementing cleaning automation right now to help with COVID-19? And while we're waiting for the polls to come through, I love the point on affordability, and I'll even go back as we think about this technology has already been around. What's also been around is this concept of, I think you touched on it, is subscription. So we think about the financial model, it's this fallacy that maybe we can't develop ROI immediately, and that it is usually in a capital expense. As we start to evolve it, why can't we have conversations about driving an ROI immediately and thinking about ROI adoption? And then, so immediately when you have ROI, given the current environment that we're in, all of a sudden now you have adoption, right? So we've got need state, we've got affordability state with a new financial model of subscription. all of a sudden adoption starts to become at the last thing, which is scale. So really, when you take all these environments that have been around for a while and bring them into a need state change and affordability and an adoption capability, that's where we really start to see scale, and this becomes something that we can really create value for the entire industry. So let's see what's coming in. Well, actually, while we're waiting, I guess, Patty, anything else that you have in terms of this conversation? I know Chris and I are very passionate about this portion. I know you as well.
Oh yeah, no, I think that what the general public is that, first of all, art, cleaning and disinfection, the whole industry is really an art. There is a science behind it. There are very definite skills associated with the different work practices and competencies, and it's now becoming not just something like you talked about, a third shift activity. It is now being looked at as that first shift activity, and everybody wants to know about it, and everybody is starting to become educated about it, which is very interesting, the conversations that go on now. But I think that what we're going to see is the whole aspect of the affordability is part of it is also being able to obtain some of the equipment that we're seeing now, because and even solutions. Everybody wants something. Everybody wants it now, and keeping with that ability to provide the equipment and services, it's going to take some time to catch up. But I think that we're going to see a demand from individuals going forward, not just from our workplaces, but from the clients and customers that are out there. They want to see this. I think we talked the last time about, we don't, some of these businesses that have some of the robots that clean at night, we don't typically see them during the day when clients are around. The other day I went into a store and I saw one and I was so excited. And I think that we're going to see more of that. And I think that's important to show that automation, innovation is part of our day-to-day life, and it's not something that we see on TV or something that just happens at nighttime.
Amen. So back to the polls as we think about that conversation. I think affordability, you hit on it. So then what came back from the group is cost. So right now, my biggest hurdle implementing cleaning automation is cost, which makes sense. So we've got standardization change, Chris, we've got robots. So maybe both of you want to touch on it. So the idea is cost. I think that's the big monkey in the room of how do we address cost given all of this effort that's required. Let's react. So Chris, what do you think? So how can we help the three of us in an industry help deliver an effective clean with implementation or with automation?
It doesn't surprise me that cost, because, as with anything, when you start first looking at it, that's the first pass that anybody ever really does is, all right, well, I'm interested in that. Or your boss tells you, hey, you need to look into that. First thing you're going to see is, and the first question you normally get is, well, how much is this going to cost me?
Mm-hmm.
But what you need to look once again, and it's our job, being in the industry, not just the cleaning industry, in the robotics side of it, and in an industry that I'm very passionate about, been in over 30 years, is that we are responsible to help them understand that. So yes, here is the cost, but let me show you how we can implement that into your system and get that back very quickly to you. And as your point, it can be a subscription cost, which is very common. A lot of stuff you get nowadays, especially software in your computer, you don't upfront buy it much, that often anymore. Usually it's a monthly subscription. So that's a very common thing. That's a way to immediately get into something without having the big upfront cost and being able to immediately start, as you said, realizing ROIs, because you don't have that massive upfront cost. Some of the fear is that, well, technology is changing. Well, one of the great things with, Brain OS system is the fact that, when you get it, you get all that updates. So everything that we're learning and everything that we're running and all the edge cases that we're solving, that you get those software updates as part of purchasing the equipment or as part of subscribing to the monthly. So you always know that your robot is going to be running, and the piece that you have, your whiz, is always going to be running at the optimum level, so that you are getting a continued optimal ROI as you're going through it. But really, to get back to it is, I think, get beyond the sticker shock sit down and take a little bit of time, and even though time I think was number 2 or 3 on that list, lack of time, if you do take some time to really understand and move beyond the initial cost and see how it can come back, and it's our job to help you understand that, our OEM partners such as SoftBank, then I think you will realize that it is much more cost effective than you probably think.
Yeah, and to, build upon that thought is that some of the new technologies that are coming out, the robots, some of the new spray systems, some of the new chemistries, you start marrying these things together and you're finding that they're much more efficient with the chemistry that they're using. So you're using actually less and doing more. And from a cost standpoint, you're actually able to save costs in some of the chemistries that you're using. The other thing is, I think we're going to start to see, and it's like I'm encouraging, is that we're going to see the robotics part marrying into some of these other technologies, and we're going to start seeing that expanding when we're looking at our cleaning and disinfection industry going forward. I'm predicting, I don't know, but I'm predicting and I'm hoping, because there's some really neat opportunities that we have as we're starting to get more and more, I guess exposure, no pun intended, to, the different industries and the needs, because there's a lot of industries that are starting to say, hey, what about me? And how, especially as people are trying to open up.
And +1 to both of what you said. I think we both have hope, and I think it's the sticker shock. And I look at cost. My first thought for cost is, let's turn it around and say, well, the cost is what you're being paid to deliver the service. So let's ask, what's the service or what you've been asked to do? And then how can we as experts help you think through delivering that service? So the request is now, how do I clean more, better, efficiently, proof of clean, as well as sanitization? You're just going to need help. So Chris, I love what you said. It's, don't worry about what does a robot mean? How do I understand robotics? We will take care of understanding robotics. Patty, you'll take care of understanding standards. It's more of understanding the overall service, and it's this integration of standards and automation with robotics that helps you actually solve the problem. So the compression is, if you wait until I have to just do cost with this next item, then it does seem like a failed experiment. Really what we're saying is, you have to do this overall task. You actually have to increase your tasks in frequency. And these are very things that robotics, sanitization, standards have been around, and it's more just adopting them into your ecosystem. So call your experts and let us think through, how do we help you perform the value that you need to the level that your clients ask, and do it above and beyond, which we know you're being asked to do. And how do we really think about that? And I've always found, even in talking to the two of you, that's really the passion from our side, is how do we help the service providers? And we're here to help and make your job easier in delivering that. So cost, yes, but let's talk value and how automation can be a part of that value, standards and sanitization. Because based on what we're seeing in the evolution, the technology is there, the business model is there, the knowledge of sanitization is there. We just have to incorporate it together. And we're finding this solution idea is something that has been around, and we're just bringing that to bear, which I really love. I think that's the idea of how we help provide it as an ecosystem versus just a single line item of equipment. It's more, let's drive a solution, and we'll worry about the technology aspect in the background. And oh, by the way, that technology will get better the second day you use it, because it's learning, right? Talk about something from a cost perspective. It gets better as you go, as does the sanitization and training. I want to make sure that we get into some questions for the group. So we've been polling some questions, and I apologize in advance if I can make this. So I think one of the questions is, and I'll maybe get this to both of you, is how can automation help keep high touch areas disinfected? And I'll actually, maybe Patty, I'll throw that to you, and then Chris, I'd love your answer as well.
Well, as we talked about earlier, some of the automation, if you're automating some of the other activities that are easier to automate, it allows your people, that cobot, relationship, to be able to then focus on those high touch areas. So again, you have a limited time amount. So if you can take and automate some activities, it allows you to then do those high touch areas that maybe, it can't be automated as easier. And then eventually, and in some situations, there may be some equipment that can also help on that with some of the new spray systems married to a robot, say.
Yeah, and that's spot on. I mean, it's really about, taking the current technology and using it to your advantage to reallocate to the tasks that can only be done by an individual. And as you said, there very well will be new things coming out in the future that will involve some new technologies married together. But right now, it is simply about making sure that those high touch areas are done. And right now, the main way to do high touch areas is it's an individual with the proper, proper processing chemical to go after it. And as long as you have that and the time to do it, I think you're gonna have a successful program.
And Patty, this is a good question. I'm gonna throw it to you too, and then Chris, I want to give you one, which I thought is great. How can companies work with you, Patty, around getting a GBAC STAR initiative, or how do we register for the STAR program?
May 7th is the launch. So watch the website for May 7th. We're going to have all of our activities. We have a new website that's coming out. There'll be an application form, some informational pieces out there. We're really working hard. The whole team, ISSA, is working hard to get everything out there online for May 7th. Obviously, you've seen yesterday early adopter with Hyatt Enterprises, and there will be a couple more. But yeah, May 7th is the launch, and would love to work with you.
I'd say, I'll give it back to you. So I think, Chris, we were talking too, so talk a little bit more. So let's say maybe back to the question, same thing, how can people start? So what's the starting point if there's interest? How can people engage in understanding robotics and automation and Brain OS, maybe even SoftBank? Like, what do I do if I want to start to engage in understanding where automation can help with an effective clean? After I'm certified, of course, after I'm GBAC certified, where does automation come to play?
Oh, absolutely. So, the great thing is we work with some phenomenal OEM partners, and, really the simplest thing to do is, as you're starting to implement and, working and getting, your certifications and getting your procedures in place, really that is the time that you want to reach out and get a potential robotics company involved. Reach out to, SoftBank, reach out, because you want to implement that into your procedures as you are building your program. It's much easier to do it that. And let's face it, most people's programs just got blown up and they're going to have to rethink everything. So now is actually the perfect time, because you're having to redo it anyway. You're having to look at the touch sites and, get your certification. So you're going to have to change what you're doing now. So you're making that change anyway. So let's plug in some automation. Let's get you back some of that time, and let's build it into the program from the front end. It's much easier to do that than come in after the fact. And it can be done after the fact, but since you're already doing it, let's just start it right now.
I love that. And even going back to the slide, I breezed right through it. The question was, some asked, like, what does CAAS is? So we've talked about SaaS as software as a service. Why can't we think about that as cleaning as a service? So when we talk about that, why can't cleaning be an evolved service? Why can't it be certification and automation and thinking about the model differently? We're now moving into the forefront where cleaning is bringing people back to work. Like you said, Chris, software has been around, subscription models have been around. Cleaning as an overall service that we're able to provide to our clients and constituents can evolve as well. And there are a lot of different ways that we can approach it. So we are definitely coming up. We've probably passed time, we're blowing past time, but I definitely want to make sure if there are any closing comments that you guys felt like we didn't touch on today, that you feel like you would like to share with the audience, please feel free. I want to give you some time, and then we'll hand it back over to Hannah and what we can do for webinar 3.
So I'll start. There is not another time in my life that I can remember where I can really say that we are all in this together. I mean, we've heard this more and more, and as Chris said just a few minutes ago, this is the time to relook at our work practices, our equipment, our needs, how we want to do business going forward. And I love the term, cleaning is bringing people back to work, and that's true, and it's going to keep us at work. It's those activities that we can do that will help us come back sooner, faster, and keep everyone safe. And so we're all in this together, and we're here to work with everybody. We're here to work together. So let's do it.
I don't think that could have been said any better. I mean, it really is. We are. If there's anything that I've seen tie, us together, it's it's this, and it's that we all want to get back out. We all want to feel safe. We want the ability to help. The tools are there. And the processes. We just need to put the pieces together. We're here to help each other. And build the confidence, because we all want the same thing. We all want to feel safe. We want the economy coming back, and we want good futures for ourselves and our children. And we're here to help assist that. And the great thing is, I feel very fortunate that I'm working for an industry and a company that can help do that and bring those pieces back together. And as the last thing for me is, it's just, cleaning has always been a huge part of my life. And it's very sad what is happening, but the positive side is, I think it really is bringing the focus on cleaning and really realizing how important cleaners are, because they are absolutely critical. I've spent the majority of my life in the cleaning business and late at night working with people, and it's some of the best hardworking people I've ever met in my life. And anything we can do to help these people and help our industry as a whole, what ISSA does, and it's just fantastic. So, let's turn this really bad thing into a positive, and everybody will be better for it.
Absolutely.
Well said. Hannah, can you compete with that? I don't know if you can, but we're going to hand over the mic to you just to see if you can. Well said, Chris. I don't think I have anything, so I'm just going to go right to Hannah.
Thank you. Yes, a tough act to follow. Thank you so much to our audience for all the questions, and thanks to our presenters for their experience, knowledge, and truly, truly excellent discussion. Thanks also to SoftBank Robotics for their sponsorship of this webinar series. For more information and access to additional resources available from ISSA, SoftBank Robotics, and our panelists, please check out the following websites. They'll appear on the screen shortly. ISSA.com/coronavirus, softbankrobotics.com, gbac.org, and braincorp.com. And then also, everyone, please join us for our next webinar in this series on Thursday, May 14th. The discussion will focus on 5 ways humans and robots can collaborate during times of crisis. You will receive a link and updates as the next session approaches. And just again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today, sending in your questions and participating with us. We look forward to having you join us in 2 weeks. Until next time.